It's Julie Douglas. I've been involved protecting badgers not for 9 years, but for over 30 years. So, a bit of a history lesson. So, the first time I attended a demo outside the offices of what was then MAF, so the organisation that Dom and that Ian then worked for, it was in the mid-1980s. And we were hopefully thinking, perhaps naively, that we could persuade the government and MAF that killing badgers didn't work. That it wasn't the way to stop bovine TB spreading in cattle, that I've actually got a report from 1928 which suggests there are means of animal husbandry techniques for stopping the spread of TB in cattle. Now, a few years later, I was involved with the National Federation of Badger Groups. It wasn't the Badger Trust in those days, it goes back so long. And we were told to stand down while the randomised badger culling trial of the early 1990s took place. We were told that if we allowed 10,000 badgers to be killed, this would prove scientifically that there was no way that killing badgers could meaningfully contribute to the control of TB. So we stood by. We let those animals be killed. We thought the science would prevail. Guess what happened? The trial had to be cut short because Lord Krebs, who was overseeing the science, found out that they were actually making matters worse. And the statement at the end of the truncated trial was that killing badgers can have no meaningful contribution to the control of TB in cattle. That was in the early 1990s. So MAF, DEFRA, they knew it. They knew it from, 30 years ago? Well, they didn't act on it. Then in 2012, after we thought that they couldn't possibly kill badgers anymore. Remember, badgers had been persecuted in the 70s. They were gassed with cyanide gas. Then they were trapped, then they were shot. Then we were told 2012 there's going to be another badger cull. And we thought, you can't do that. You've already been shown. It doesn't work. By 2012, a scientist of my acquaintance, a guy called Dr. Chris Cheeseman, who used to work at APHA at Woodchester Park, had said he'd actually spoken to a government minister in a Tory government and explained that badgers were not a main contributor to the transmission of TB in cattle. They were irrelevant. And the minister said, yes, Dr. Cheeseman, I appreciate what you're saying, but we have to do something for the farmers. Yeah, they've screwed the farmers. They have their system of test, slaughter, retest, slaughter, 28,000 cattle a year killed for bovine TB. Farmers only paid slaughter weight compensation, doesn't matter if it's a pedigree breeding animal, stuff it. They get screwed, they're on movement restrictions, it doesn't do anything positive for the farmers. So now we're in the 8th year of the badger cull. 141,000 badgers killed and counting because it's already happening. The cull's already started up again. And we know, the figures are showing, everyone else has said it, it makes no contribution to TB in cattle. We know there are ways that DEFRA could improve the situation for farmers. There are improvements to cattle movement, to cattle testing. I've been told since the 1980s that a cattle vaccine was 12 years away. Hang on, that was like 1985. How many years ago is that? My maths isn't that good, but it's more than 12 years. The excuse always used to be, we were in the EU, and you can't tell the difference between vaccinated flesh from an animal that's been vaccinated against TB and one that's infected. Well, we're not in the EU now, so what's the score? By the delay. We're told that DEFRA want to use every tool in the toolbox. Well, the only tool in the toolbox doesn't seem to be vaccination, either of cattle, camelids, or wildlife. It seems we just kill everything and stuff the science. Well, that's not on. That's not on anymore. Yet tell the truth. Now, we always hear it's trotted out every time a minister or a representative of the NFU or anyone talks about TB. It was trotted out again in the case of Geronimo. TB is a terrible disease. Well, yeah, it used to be a terrible disease. In the days before antibiotics, in the days before BCG vaccinations, 40% of the humans who died of TB in Britain died of TB that they'd caught from drinking unpasteurised milk. Note it's unpasteurised, okay? Now, personally, I'd say go vegan, it's not a problem. Yeah? Now, the other side is all those reactor cattle who are sent for slaughter, 28,000 every year. What happens to their corpses? Well, have you ever eaten food in a school canteen? Have you ever eaten food in a hospital canteen? Do you have a friend who's a prison officer, a probation officer who might have eaten in a prison canteen? Anyone who's been on a charge, held in a remand centre? They've all eaten meat if they eat meat, from animals infected with TB. Now, we've heard a lot about tuberculous lesions. It's reckoned that only 40% of the animals who test positive have visible tuberculous lesions. And DEFRA's own reports say that, oh, they've missed the other lesions, either because they were too small, they were microscopic, or because the vets in the slaughterhouses were having to look too quickly at the corpses, so they couldn't see them. So you've eaten those tuberculous lesions, but on a freedom of information request, DEFRA will say, doesn't matter because you cooked the meat anyway. Well, if that wasn't a reason to give up eating meat, I don't know what is. Very yuck factor, guys. And finally, I'd like to say, why am I here? And I'm here because of a very good friend of mine, and I can see her in the crowd, and she's a livestock vet. She's called Alice Brough, and she's an absolute star. And she phoned me up one evening, and she didn't know I'd moved to Scotland, but hey, I have, because I used to live just down the road from Helen. And she said, could I get some people out, some people I knew, to come and help Helen? Her alpaca angels. And you know what? We did. We got out people who'd been protesting against the badger cull. We got out Hunt Sads. We got out animal rights activists. We got out people who just love animals. And they all became alpaca angels. And as Donna said, we now have a real army to fight DEFRA and to prove that they have lied. Not just for 4 years, not for 5 years, not for 9 years, not for 35 years, but ever since they were formed as the first Ministry of Agriculture after the Second World War. So we're not going to give up. It's been a long fight, but we're nearly at the end now, and we're not giving up.